excited for our Love the World auction that is coming up on Friday, March 7th. We will be having a silent, live, and dessert auction at this event. We are looking for a few more dessert auction items. They can be homemade or store-bought. Head to the app or the website to sign up and you will get more details there. Thank you for partnering with us for our Love the World auction.
Hey church, welcome to week 2 of our series through the book of Jonah. Our spring small group signups are live, so check out the Church Center app or the clipboards out front on your way out and sign up for a group that works for you. Groups begin the week of March 9th. Our third annual Love the World auction is only 2 Fridays away on March 7th. Get those tickets now because prices will go up the week of our event. We could still use more silent auction items and dessert items. Check the app or website. This is going to be an incredible evening. We can't wait. We have Easter, Mother's Day, our church family barbecue, and more coming up this spring. Make sure you have the Prodigal Church app on your phone to stay in the know for all things Prodigal. We're so grateful for your generosity. If you'd like to give, you can use our app, website, or the kiosks in the lobby. That's all for announcements. Thanks for joining us for week 2 of Jonah. Have a great Sunday, church.
I thought I could run from him. I thought I could change his mind. I thought he had abandoned me. But I've learned you can run from God, but you can't outrun him.
One of my favorite stories about Jonah is this little boy who was a third grader. He was coming out of Sunday school, walking home, and he had this picture, this drawing of Jonah and the whale. They had studied it in Sunday school, and then there was this curmudgeon, this older guy who was walking his dog, who saw that picture. And he looked at the little boy and said, "Son, you don't mean that you believe in the Old Testament nonsense, do you? Of a whale swallowing Jonah?" He said, "Well, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask Jonah." And the fellow said, "Well, what if Jonah isn't in heaven?" And the little boy said, "Well, then you can ask him." It's a whale of a tale. And today we are in chapter 2 of Jonah. And let me just review with you for a moment, in case you missed last week's first sermon. Jonah was an 8th century prophet to the people of Israel. He was a nationalistic prophet, okay, famous for prophesying victory for the people of God. But in Jonah chapter 1, Jonah, son of Amittai, was called by God to preach not to Israel, but to Nineveh. Nineveh was their enemy. Nineveh was their arch rival. Nineveh was their oppressor. And Jonah says, not going to do it. He buys a one-way ticket to Timbuktu. God calls Jonah east, Jonah goes west. God calls Jonah to travel by land, Jonah goes by sea. God calls Jonah to the big city, Jonah gets a ticket to paradise. Now, while on this boat, a storm begins to rage, and the sailors just start throwing stuff off the boat to kind of lighten the load, and they're like, "Where's Jonah?" He's sleeping in the bottom of the boat. They wake him up. "Pray to your God. This storm is supernatural. Why is this happening?" Jonah gets to the upper deck and says, "It's me. Hi. I'm the problem. It's me." And these pagan sailors are like, "What do we do?" And Jonah's like, "Throw me overboard." And they're like, "No, we can't do that." But eventually, to save everyone else, they concede. And they throw Jonah into the deep sea, and the waves calm down. And it is in Jonah where there begins to be a shift of theology of Israel. They're moving from a tribalistic perspective to a universal outlook. In other words, the book of Jonah as a whole reveals that God is not only concerned about Israel, but God is concerned about all nations. God is not just concerned with the chosen people. God is concerned about all people. A Jewish rabbi says it like this: to be chosen doesn't mean you're a person of privilege. It means you're a person of responsibility. I've discovered that sometimes the most important Christian education, the most important spiritual formation for us is not just about learning. Sometimes it's about unlearning some things that we've learned that may not be so. Mark Twain said it best when he said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." That's true. This is the lesson of Jonah. You can have all of the right answers and still be so very far away from the heart of God. So there's Jonah, treading water in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Out of luck, out of time, just out. Verse 17 of chapter 1. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Now, here the story becomes a bit familiar. Jonah is swallowed by a whale, right? There's this video on the internet that many of you have sent me these past couple of weeks, of a man getting swallowed and then spit out by a whale. Check it out.
This, you got to see, video to our monitors from off the coast of Chile. This is a kayaker meeting a whale, and not in the way you want to meet a whale. A kayaker chomped, in fact, right there in the water by the whale. In fact, he says he thought he was dead after that humpback whale nearly swallowed him. The young man's dad capturing it all on his phone. Here's the moment. There's the chomp. Well, his dad was saying, stay calm in the moment, like a dad does. Seconds later, that humpback whale, well, the humpback whale stayed calm enough to open its jaws and let the kayaker go. Thank goodness he's okay. He made it back to shore unharmed.
Incredible, right? Like this just happened like a couple of weeks ago. And so Christians then run to the comment sections and say things like, see, Jonah's account is true. God is on the move. Proof that God sent a whale to swallow the prophet Jonah all those years ago. First of all, the Bible doesn't say that a whale swallowed Jonah. It says it was a huge fish. And a whale is not a huge fish. So did God make a mistake? No. I think he did it on purpose. A whale is a mammal or a porpoise, not a fish. So is the story of Jonah true? Is the Bible wrong? Could Jonah actually be swallowed by a fish? And there is so much focus on the drama inside the whale that we miss the drama that's going on inside of Jonah. Let us not miss what the book of Jonah is trying to tell us. It's not about a fish. Chapter 2. From the inside of the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, in my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again towards your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. I will say, salvation comes from the Lord. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Jonah is called to get the Assyrians to repent. But here, in the belly of a great fish, it is Jonah that does the repenting. The book of Jonah, it's a whale of a tale. And here in chapter 2, it's a whale of a prayer. And it's actually a psalm. The Psalms are located in the center of the Bible. It's our hymn book. It's the prayer book, the praise book, the song book of Israel. The Psalms articulate feelings of lament, of sorrow, and of thanksgiving. Jonah here, in the belly of the fish, is reciting psalms. Jonah's prayer here in chapter 2, it's a combination of multiple psalms, including Psalm 120, Psalm 18, Psalm 69, Psalm 30, and Psalm 50. Jonah doesn't articulate like free-form, spontaneous prayer. He sings spiritual songs. He recites prayers that he had memorized. Eugene Peterson said, "Prayer is the most deeply human action in which we can engage." We have behavior in common with the animals. We have thinking in common with the angels. But prayer is distinctly human. It's innate. It's intuitive. Even atheists pray when they get in confinement. They're praying beyond themselves. The practice of prayer is central to the human experience. And what you see in Jonah is in his descent, he stops bellyaching and he starts beseeching. Did you know that the only thing that the disciples asked Jesus to teach them was how to pray? Prayer is an enormous source of goodness and power in our lives and in our world. It is no small thing to pray, ever. No prayer is tiny. No prayer is wasted. No prayer is unheard. One of my pet peeves as a pastor is when someone comes up to me and asks, "Pastor, would you get things started with a little prayer?" And I've never said it, but I want to respond with, I sure won't. Because there is no such thing as little prayers. And today, I would like to introduce you to a short prayer, but it is not a little prayer. It's called the Jesus Prayer. And it originated in the Egyptian desert 400 years after the time of Jesus with the early church desert fathers and mothers. It is a prayer that is still prayed today by Christians all over the world, most common in the Orthodox tradition. The prayer is, "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner." A shortened version is, "Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy." Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I repeat this prayer often when I'm alone with God. And I don't recite it once. I recite it several times. I grew up in the Catholic tradition. And a huge part of Catholic Mass is repeating a prayer that's memorized. And the danger in that is it can become routine. And it can become something that you say, but not really something that you mean. And then I went to a different kind of church. I was told at this new church that spontaneity in prayer is the best way that you can pray. And if you were in a group and you could pray out loud with fervor and passion and you could be spontaneous, well, that was when it really means something. And so I did a course correct. Repetition is bad. Spontaneity is good. But over the years, I have discovered that not all repetition is meaningless, and not all spontaneity is meaningful. You don't have to be articulate when you pray. You can stutter. You can pause between sentences. You can repeat the same thing over and over again. God's good with it. For me, the Jesus prayer helps me surrender the notions of God that made him my servant or my genie. And it helps me let go of a vending machine God. We are children in his arms, not just beggars at his door. I love this prayer on so many levels. The prayer identifies God's primary disposition toward us, loving mercy. The Jesus prayer does not unleash God's mercy. It orients us to it. God's mercy is an infinite waterfall that never ceases. We don't turn the tap on. Rather, the Jesus prayer is just one way that I'm able to position my heart beneath the flow and willingly receive God's kindness with open hands and a kind heart. Prayer not only changes things, it changes you. And it changed Jonah. In my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. It is in the depths that we find grace. Most of the time, grace is found in the seaweeds of life, not on the cruise ships above the water. Not just on the peaks and the mountaintops. No, grace is more often found in the low places, isn't it? It's in the depths. It's in the flood. It's in the storm where we find God's grace. Or, as Jonah says, it's in the pit. It's in Sheol. What is Sheol? It's a Hebrew word for the place of shadows, the place of death. It's there that we, more often than in our successes, come to the end of ourselves and discover the source of our salvation and our deliverance. J.K. Rowling said, "Rock bottom can become a solid foundation on which you rebuild your life." AA teaches us that. A few years ago, J.K. Rowling gave a commencement address in the Northeast in which she talked about her downfall, her descent. At age 28, her young marriage ended, and suddenly she found herself a single mother, almost homeless. But she said, in that season of descent, I began to direct all of my energy into finishing the only thing that mattered to me, and that was my writing. She went on to say, if I had succeeded at anything else, I would never have found the determination to succeed in this one area. In other words, she said, my success was built on my failure. And if you know J.K. Rowling, okay, she did all right. She is one of the best-selling authors of all time with over 450 million copies of her books sold. Maya Angelou said, you may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. In failing, one might encounter a defeat, but you're not defeated. Failure is an event, not a person. Is that for you? Okay, you tried something. You went on a ledge. You made the leap. You took the chance, and you fell. You may have failed, but you are no failure. Failure is an event, not a person. So if you have failed, okay, you're in good company. I've discovered that God continually uses people who fail because there just aren't any other kind of people around. And if you think about it, just look at the flops in the Bible. Jacob was a swindler. Moses was a manslaughterer. Joseph was just a spoiled brat. David was an adulterer. Peter was a traitor. Paul was a persecutor. John Mark was a quitter. But God never gave up on them. You see, with God, the descent is for the sake of the ascent. Have you discovered what I've discovered? That you really never know that Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you have. Where Jesus said it like this in Matthew 10:39, you have to lose your life to find your life. And this is a good metaphor for Jonah. Now, the Jewish rabbinic tradition has much to say about Jonah. The story of Jonah is read every year on the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. So you could think of it as a tomb, right? The whale. I mean, if you're swallowed by a big fish, that's it, we're done. It's a tomb. But in so many ways, it really isn't a tomb. It's a womb. Because it is in the body of that fish that Jonah takes the time and has the period of reflection where he decides, I know I don't want to do this, but I know I've got to do this. And so it is a rebirth of some kind. And there are many artistic depictions of this story where it actually looks like Jonah is curled up like in a fetal position. This could be a time of death and destruction. It could also be a time of transformation and rebirth. And it's very interesting if you look at the first chapters of Genesis in the creation account. There's a beautiful parallel with the book of Jonah. See, in the early chapters of Genesis, it says there was a great Tehom. Okay, God's Spirit went over this great depth. And the word Tehom here, it means depths or the deep places or the abyss. It carries with it the connotation of chaos. And that was the beginning of creation. Out of this mess, out of this chaos, God created. The same word is used for Jonah when he goes into the whale. He goes into the deep, the depths, the abyss, the Tehom, the chaos. And so there is a sense in which this chaos and return to before creation, it's necessary for a new creation. So his going in the depths is like God's Spirit hovering over the depths and beginning creation. And once he's there, he begins to create something new. New in terms of who he is and what he needs to do. And so is the womb negative or positive? Solomon Rushdie wrote something called Outside the Whale. And it's just an excerpt that I'm going to share with you guys, but it was written in 1990, and he says this: "The truth is that there is no whale. We live in a world without hiding places. However much we may wish to return to the womb, we cannot be unborn. Either we can delude ourselves, or we can do what human beings do instinctively when they realize that the womb is lost forever. We can make a devil of a racket. Say, 'Here I am, you're going to have to reckon with me.' So in place of Jonah's womb, I am recommending the ancient tradition of making a big fuss, as noisy a complaint about the world as humanly possible." Yes, so that's a very powerful statement. He's saying, we can't hide. We can't retreat. You need to be out in the world. We can't return to our mother's womb and the security that we find there. We gotta go. However, you could look at the womb in a positive light. In his book, Inside the Whale, George Orwell writes this in 1940. "Being inside a whale is a very comfortable, cozy, home-like thought. The whale's belly is simply a womb, big enough for an adult. There you are in the dark, with yards of blubber between yourself and reality, able to keep an attitude of the completest indifference no matter what happens. Do we need to go back in order to find the resources we need to go back into the world?" Other rabbinic interpreters of Jonah imagine that the whale takes Jonah all around the world in order for Jonah to recognize just how small he is in relation to all of creation. So is it a tomb or is it a womb? Whatever it was, the experience forced Jonah to make a decision that he was reluctant to make. Let me share one other thought about this text. In the New Testament, some of you know that Jonah becomes a prototype, a precursor of Jesus, not because of his resistance, but rather because of his confinement. Jesus knew Jonah's story, and he knew it well. Though they were centuries apart, they grew up within 3 miles of each other. Jesus knew the story of Jonah. And in Matthew 12, you may remember the religious professionals, the scribes, the Pharisees, they come to see Jesus demanding a sign. They won't believe unless Jesus pulls a rabbit out of a hat, unless Jesus does something miraculous and spectacular. And you remember, Jesus refuses. He refuses, and he comes down pretty hard on the religious professionals. This is what he says, Matthew chapter 12. "Only an evil and adulterous generation would demand a miraculous sign. No sign will be given to you, except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was in the belly of a great fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth for 3 days." What's he talking about? Jesus is talking about his own death and resurrection, his own descent. Like Jonah of old, Jesus is going to descend into the depths, the Tehom, the chaos, into Sheol, into the place of the dead, in the place of gloom and darkness where the gates are forever closed. And like Jonah, on the third day, God's going to lift him up. In other words, his descension is going to lead to his ascension. May it be so when we too find ourselves in the belly of a great fish. Lord Jesus the Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner.
Sometimes I don't feel my highest. It's like I reach up and find that I'm not the tallest. Like my good just ain't good enough, my honest ain't true enough, and my world is a sad kind of blue. I look to the heavens for something to pull me through. Well, Lord, I've been drinking, but Jesus is praying for me. And I am calling whenever I fall to my knees. Well, I've had my share of Sunday whiskey rolls, but he's filling my cup with the sweetest I'll ever know. Sometimes that whiskey don't sting, and sometimes that old bourbon makes me sing. I can't tell if I'm numb to the pain or if I'm going insane, but I'm losing my sense of time, so I call on Jesus, 'cause he is a friend of mine. Oh, Lord, I've been drinking, but Jesus is praying for me. And I hear him calling whenever I fall to my knees. Well, I've had my share persuaded.